So the Gemara tells us in Kiddushin, and Daf Chav Tesam and Aleph, regarding on the sugya of mitzvahs hasei shazman grama, time-oriented mitzvahs, where the Mishnah says nashim apater from mitzvahs hasei shazman grama. So the Gemara in Kiddushin, regarding a whole discussion regarding Mila, they quote the pasuk Kasher Tziva Oso, that God commanded Abraham to mal his son Yitzchak. So the Gemara makes a drasha, Oso velo Osa. The mitzvah of Mila is on the father, not the mother, meaning on Abraham and not Sarah. So that's the Gemara. So we see from the Gemara that a woman isn't obligated in making sure that her son has to be Gemara. We'll see if there is no father, maybe she falls under the Beis Din role. But strictly speaking, you have a father and mother. The chiyuv is on the father to make sure that the son gets Mila. So Tosfos in Kiddushin, Daf Chav Tes, asks the famous kasha. What do we need a pasuk? Kasha tziva oso, oso v'lo osa. Typically, they have the mitzvahs aseh shazman grama. I don't need the pasuk. Mila is a mitzvah aseh shazman grama. Uveyom hashmini yibo b'sar alaso. Uveyom afilu b'shabes. But that's not our concern. Uveyom, I mean, to exclusion of Laila. That we see the mitzvah of Mila is only done during the day and not at night. It's a classical mitzvah aseh shazman grama, and therefore a woman should be exempt. So Tosfos answers, there's a machlokas in the Gemara Yavamas whether a Mila shelo bizmana is limited to daytime. The way we paskin is yes. We paskin like Techam, yes, but Tosfos is going not aliba de hilchasa. Tosfos is quoting that shita according to the Manda Amar, who says that Mila shelo bizmana could be yom b'mayov b'malay. In other words, until day 8 you have to do it. On day 8 you have to do it during the day, but once you get to 9, 10, 11, 12, it can be done yom or laila. Hence he says it's a mitzvah aseh shel lav zman grama. Therefore, according to this opinion, Mila is considered not a time-oriented mitzvah. It's a 24-hour-a-day mitzvah, yom and laila, and therefore it's a mitzvah aseh shel lav zman grama, and therefore a woman should be chayav. I would have thought a woman, the wife, the mother, should be obligated. Kamash malan comes the pasuk, kasher tziva oso, oso v'lo osa, to tell me that women are exempt. So I might have thought that it's a lav zman grama, since it could be done b'yom v'layla after day 8. Kamash malan, no, that's what Tosfos right. Rabbi Kiva Eger asks, according to this opinion of Tosfos, which we don't paskin like, but according to this opinion, like, what do you mean? Even if you assume, like that opinion, that after day 8 you could do a bris on day 9, day or night, so would that make it a lav zman grama? But according to everybody, a Mila shelo bizmana cannot be done on Shabbos. So you can't do a Mila shelo bizmana on Shabbos. So if you can't do it on Shabbos, so then it should still be a mitzvah aseh shazman grama, and therefore women should be patur. So what do you mean? It's true a mitzvah bizmana can be done yom halayla, but it can't be done on Shabbos. So that should make it to a zman grama, and therefore we're back to akasha. So what do we need a pasuk for if it's a zman grama? So that's what Rabbi Kiva Eger goes into, that whole question of when something. What's pshat that a Mila shelo bizmana can't be done on Shabbos? In other words, do we say, but let's say you went ahead and did it. It's true you shouldn't do it, but let's say someone went ahead on day 10 and they did a Mila shelo bizmana. Let's assume they didn't know even, and they went ahead and did it. Are they yotzei the mitzvah of Mila? Or do you have to do another Mila? So obviously you can't do another Mila, but you have to do a tafis down britz, or so pashtus, it would be yotzei. In other words, you shouldn't do a Mila shelo bizmana, but if you do it, pashtus, you should be yotzei the mitzvah. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva Eger says, since if I do a Milah Shelo Bizmana on Shabbos, it's still a go, according to Rabbi Akiva Eger. So therefore, that makes it a Lav Zman Grama. The fact something's usher to do, again, this is the major machlokus among the Rishonim and Achronim. How do you define what is a Zman Grama, what is it? So this is part of one Nekuda in that major machlokus is, some will say the fact the halacha says it's usher to do, that's enough to make it a Zman Grama. And clear Rabbi Akiva Eger disagrees and says, no, if Bidi Eved, you can fulfill your mitzvah during that time, the root of the halach is in the Bidi Eved, and if I can fulfill my mitzvah with on Shabbos, that makes it a Lav Zman Grama, even though I shouldn't have done it, and hence, therefore, we need the pasuk of Osah below Osah. So that touches on a major machlokus on what is defined, what's called Zman Grama now. The fact something's usher to do, does that make it a Zman Grama or no? The fact it's usher doesn't mean anything. The question is, b'di'evet, if I do it, if I'm still not Yotzei, so then it's considered a Zman Grama. That's a discussion. You have a question? So that's answer number one. So answer number one, according to Tosas and Kedushin, is the question is, why do we need a pasuk if it's a mitzvah sasesha Zman Grama? So Tosas answers, because it's a Lav Zman Grama. Since you could do a Milah Shelo Bizmana ben b'yom ben b'layla, and since it's a Lav Zman Grama, therefore I need the pasuk. What about Shabbos? Shabbos it's also to do. Einachinami it's also to do, but if I did it, it's a go. So therefore that makes it Zman, and therefore it's a Lav Zman Grama, and therefore according to this opinion in Tosfos, Laila is Zman Milah and Shabbos is Zman Milah, and hence it's a Lav Zman Grama, and I need the pasuk Osah below Osah. So that's good according to that opinion, that Milah Shelo Bizmana could be done by life, but we pass like the Chachamim, that even a Milah Shelo Bizmana has to be done during the day. So Hadar Kasha L'Duchta, we're back to our original question. Then what do we need the pasuk for? Pashas, it's a mitzvah sasesha Zman Grama, and therefore, what do I need the pasuk for? So comes along Tosas and Megillah, and Daf Chaf, I believe. Tosas and Megillah says a different Havamina. He says, you know what I would have thought? If I didn't have the pasuk, and I would just have the concept of mitzvah sasesha Zman Grama, when would I say a woman's exempt from a mitzvah sasesha Zman Grama? That's a regular mitzvah. Sukkah, lulav, matzah, etc. But an aseh sheyesh bo kares, but milah is different. For failure to perform the mitzvah of milah carries the penalty of kares. So therefore, I would have thought that it's almost like a lav. It's almost like a lav. In other words, since it's an aseh sheyesh bo kares, I might think you treat it like a los aseh, and we know a woman is chayiv in negative commandments just like men. So an aseh sheyesh bo kares would make it either however you're going to learn Pshat and Tosas, it's still a Zman Grama, but it's a stronger one, or it's either like it's a lav, whatever the Pshat is. It's an aseh sheyesh bo kares, and therefore I might think it's different than the classical Zman Grama, and I would think a woman is not exempt, and therefore she'd be chayiv to make sure. Kamash Balan comes the pasuk Osah below Osah to teach me a woman is exempt. So that's Tosas and Megillah. Why we need the pasuk? We need the pasuk because I might have thought it's an aseh sheyesh bo kares and it's treated like a lav, and therefore we need the pasuk to tell me otherwise. So that's the second shot. A3 is the Ritva. The Ritva says, when would I say a woman is exempt from a mitzvah saseh, shazman grama? Again, that's the classical mitzvahs like lulav, sukkah, etc. However, milah is different. What they call it's a mitzvah shebagufo, not har gufo even. In fact, the other way. In other words, lulav and sukkah, that's a mitzvah shebagufo. You're doing it yourself. But milah is not a mitzvah shebagufo, not in har guf anyway. And therefore, when would I say a woman is exempt from a zman grama? When it has to do with her performing it. when she's the one who's performing. But if the mitzvah is on someone else, so maybe there wouldn't be an exemption of a mitzvah aseh shazman grama. So kamash malan osa v'lo osa to teach me that she's exempt. So we have three pshatim. Number one is one is not aliba dehilchasa, but where we consider mila alav zman grama, and therefore I need the pasuk. According to Tosfos Megillah, you can learn it that way also. It's an aseh sheyesh bo kora, so it's like a lav, and therefore she's chayiv, and therefore I need the pasuk to exempt her. Or we have the ritva, she's only exempt from mitzvahs for herself to do, but the mitzvahs on someone else, like in the case of Mila, so therefore she's exempt. Therefore, I would think she's chayiv. Kamash malan, I need the pasuk to exempt her. A4, the Tosfos Harid. The Tosfos Harid says, so what are we assuming up until now? That what is the mitzvah of Mila? The mitzvah of Mila is the Maisa Chaticha. You cut off the arla. You do the act. Like any other mitzvah, you put on something. Mila is the mitzvah. So basically it's a Maisa mitzvah like eating matzah. And therefore, we assume it's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama. Comes along the Tosfos Harid. He wants to redefine the texture of the mitzvah. He wants to redefine the mitzvah. He says, the mitzvah isn't the Maisa Mila. The mitzvah is the result. To be a mahol, to be a gemalt. In fact, that's the famous Maharach Ar Zarua, the Ar Zarua son. He has a whole discussion on the mitzvah of shlichus. Which mitzvah is not him? A lot of people, the Rishonim Achronim, it's a big shasar shlichus. What mitzvahs lend themselves to shlichus? What mitzvahs don't? So there are many different kola, but the famous klal of the Maharach Ar Zarua, he says, well, it depends. You have to ask yourself, if the mitzvah is the Maisa mitzvah, kind of like the Tosfos Harid. In other words, I can't have you put my tefillin on for me. If the mitzvah is for the tefillin, the Maisa mitzvah, or to shake the lulav, you can't. Then obviously you can't shake the lulav for me. If it's the Maisa mitzvah, then you can't have shlichus. And therefore, but if the mitzvah is result oriented, so then it makes sense. If the mitzvah is just to get a desired result, then what's the difference who does it as long as the result gets done? So the Tosfos Harid wants to say that the mitzvah of Mila, it's being a shem mahol, being gamal. Kind of like the raya to this is the famous Gemara in Shabbos with David HaMelech when he was sitting in the Beis HaMerchatz in the bathhouse, and he was very depressed. I can't do any mitzvahs now. And either nisker hamila, or he looked at the mila, and then he was nisyashev daito. That's the famous medrash. That's the famous Gemara. So the kasha, so what do we see from here? So as the Marach Azura points out also over here, what, he just did the bris milah? Like, what's he so? I mean, nisyashev daito. He was 8 days old when it happened. Like, what's going on here? So regarding the klal of os, so we have a principle in the Gemara: osek b'mitzvah, pater min ha-mitzvah. You're involved in a mitzvah, you're exempt from a mitzvah. But hamakayim mitzvah eino pater. The fact you fulfill a mitzvah doesn't mean you're exempt. So that's what he's saying. David was makayim the mitzvah. He's makayim the mitzvah. There's a mitzvah of being gamal, like many say, like the Tziv writes in the, I think in Parashas Lechacha uses by the Bina, it says a bris olam. What do you mean it's a bris olam? Why can you do a bris on day? No, but it's a bris olam. There are two aspects to the mitzvah of Mila. There's the Maisa Chaticha, but there's a second aspect. You're a shem molo, and therefore that's the pshat. And that's what the Maharach Zaru is saying. Parenthetically, the Baal Shem Tov has a nice pshat on this Gemara. What's pshat? Why only the Mila? Why wasn't he thinking about his payas? Or some other mitzvah to midas? Like, like Mila? Why dafka Mila did he have to think of? Why couldn't he think of another mitzvah? And he says it's lav daf. He wasn't in the Beis HaMerchatz. It's metaphorical. It's a metaphor. It just means that. What does it mean? It was David HaMelech was contemplating. He was thinking, wow, what mitzvahs do I really have? Like, I don't really do this mitzvah right. I don't really do this one lishma. I do this for the money, for the covet, or whatever. How many mitzvahs do I really do properly? And then, Niskor Yom, Niskor Es HaMilah. On day 8, what pure motives I must have. The only mitzvah I really do is Shema, even though you could say they can't even have kavanah, and you could argue the other way, but the Baal Shem Tov says it's Hasidic Torah, so you can't argue. So from that aspect, how much pure an 8-day-old baby doing a mitzvah purely l'shma for the sake of a yid becoming a mahol, that's why. You found one mitzvah you can hold on to. And therefore, that's why Niskor Yom HaMilah, the Milah represents l'shma. That's how one of the Hasidic Rabbi said after him, for Moshe me something, says, that's what we say at our bris. Kishem shenichnas l'bris, keini kanet l'torah chuppah l'masim tovim. What's the pshat? Just like I did the Milah l'shma l'shem shamayim, so too when it comes to Torah, chuppah, masim tovim, at least some of those things, let me hook on to a shem shamayim. You're never able to do everything. If you're a perfectionist, it's never going to work out. You're never going to be everything. But at least if I could do something, if I could get a little lishma in my mitzvah, then it'll be a bris olam. As that's what the Netziv talks about, the mashach harlaso, that a person who's mashach harlaso, you lose your credit for the milah. That if you have a lishma, it'll make it a bris olam, and to change it. So that's the pshat of it. So getting back, that's what the Tosfos Harid says, that the mitzvah isn't the ma'isa chaticha, but the mitzvah is a chalo shein maho, and therefore that's the pshat. And therefore, when is a woman putter from a mitzvah saseisha as man grama? That's when it's a classical ma'isa mitzvah. So there's reason for it to be exempt. But if the mitzvah is a result, then it's not as man grama. It could be done. I have to ensure the milah comes. The milah begins right away. Day 1, I got to call a doctor. I got to call a mo. I got to call the caterer. So there is no day 1, day 2. They say I am chayiv. I'm osek in the milah to make sure the milah gets done, and therefore that's according to the Tosfos Harid. It's a lav zman grama. I need oso v'lo osa to tell me that she's exempt. One more approach is the approach of the Turei Even. The Turei Even, he actually says it in Chagiga. Chagiga daf tezayin amid aleph. The Gemara is talking about their smicha on the karbanis, but over there in that statement, the Netziv has the following yisod. Actually, not the Netziv, the Turei Even. The Turei Even has the following yisod. He says the major difference in milah versus the other classical mitzvahs, lulav, sukkah, matzah, shofar. He says, let's say this year, 5773. So you have a mitzvah of shofar, matzah, lulav, etc. Yeah, and then come next year, or let's say last year, 5772. You have a mitzvah milah. You have a mitzvah of lulav, matzah. Next year, 5774. There's an annual chiyuv. In other words, whether I actually fulfill my mitzvah of shofar this year, it's totally irrelevant. I'm chayiv next year in shofar, whether I did the mitzvah of shofar this year or not. Whether I did to each. So basically, it's, each year, it's a separate machayiv every year. And therefore, that's the classical mitzvah saseisha as mangrama. But milah, the Turei Even writes, that's a one-time chiyuv. And Yom HaShmini Yimo, have a chiyuv. Come third month, it's not a new chiyuv, it's the same chiyuv I never did. In other words, regarding the mitzvah of last year, that was an absolute cancellation. That was it. The mitzvah's over, I'm generating a new machayev. But by milah, it's the same mitzvah. In fact, that's the whole discussion. We can't do milah at night. How do you view milah at night? Is it a cancellation of the mitzvah, and therefore each day is a new chiyuv? Or no? It's a temporary suspension. I can't do the milah at night because of technical reasons, but it's the same chiyuv milah that I have all the time. So that's what the Turei Even says. So I would have thought, when a woman exempt from mitzvah saseisha as mangrama, that's on a once a year, an annual mitzvah, that you have a chiyuv, and then next year you generate a new chiyuv. But if it's only a one-time shot, it's the same mitzvah milah today, 5 years from now, so therefore that there's no exemption on. That's the Chiddush, that's the Tur Yevin's Chiddush regarding why Mila is different. With this, he's actually answering something else as well. There's a famous kasha on the Rambam. The Rambam writes that the mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash is biyom ulo v'layla. The mitzvah is uyom hukam es hamishkan. The mitzvah of building the Mishkan is during the day, not at night. And, okay, that's one fact of life, and it's a pasuk, but the Rambam codifies it. Second fact of life, the Rambam writes, Nashim chayavos bebinyan beis hamikdash, or bebinyan hamishkan. The Rambam writes, women are chayiv in the mitzvah. So they all ask, what do you mean? The Rambam so serves obeyonei. It's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, because you'd only be yom and not b'layla. In the same next sentence he says, and women are chayiv. So the Tur Yevin answers based on the same yisod. He says, no, because why isn't the exemption of Zman Grama apply here? Because the Zman Grama only applies when each day or each time it's a new Machayev. Here it's a one-time shot. You have a mitzvah to build the Beis HaMikdash. So it's the same, and at nighttime it's not that, okay, the next day if I don't build it, I have a new chiyuv. It's the same chiyuv. It's just at night. It's just temporary suspended at night. But be'etzem the chiyuv applies. The chiyuv applies all the time, and therefore, just like he says by Mila at night, that's what he says here by the Binyan Beis Hamikdash. He says there is no exemption at night. There is, and therefore women aren't exempt from these type of. There is no exemption in Zman Grama if it's one Machayev for the rest of your time. And another answer they give also to this kasha is, when do we say women are pater from mitzvah hasei zman grama? That's on a personal chiyuv. But on a choves hatzibur, on a communal obligation, we don't exempt them. So someone will say, Binyan Beis HaMikdash is a choves hatzibur, and that's why. And therefore there's no exemption in zman grama. So let's summarize. We discuss the famous kasha of Tosas. The Gemara says in Kedushin, Kasha tziva oso v'lo osa. God commanded Abram and not Sarah, and hence women are exempt from their obligation to circumcise their son. So Tosas, of course, it's obvious. You make it sound like you discovered America here. It's a mitzvah saseh shazman gram. Of course, they're pater. So we had 5 different approaches. A1 was Tosas in Kedushin, not Aliba de Hilchasa, who says that it's going according to the opinion Shemir Shalom Bizman is good B'Yom Yom Balayla, and therefore it's considered a lav Zman Grama. So Rabbi Kiva, what about Shabbos? But since B'Diavad it works on Shabbos, so therefore it's considered like it is Zman, and therefore Milo is a lav Zman Grama, and they need the pasuk. According to Tosas and Megillah, it's an Aseh Sheish Bokaris, and therefore it's considered like a lav, or whatever the pshat is. And therefore I would think women are chayev, kamash b'lan osa v'lo osa. Yeah, the ritva, that's only mitzvahs they do begufo, that they're exempt from. Lulav, sukkah, but over here, mila, that's on someone else, so therefore I would have thought they're not exempt, kamash b'lan osa v'lo osa. Tosas harid is not as mangrama because it's a result-oriented mitzvah, therefore women are chayev, kamash b'lan, I would have said they were chayev, kamash b'lan osa v'lo osa. And the last pshat in the Tur Yevin, they're only exempt from annual chiyuvim, or daily, whatever the case may be, or daily chiyuvim. But something which is only a one-time shot, and it's just temporary suspended at night, but it's just a laying forth, and it comes back the next day, so therefore there's no exemption on mitzvah saseh. They're not considered a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, because it's a continuous obligation, and you can't do it at night, but that's because it's only suspended, not because it's the same chiyuv, and therefore I would have thought women are chayev, kamash balan, oso, v'lo osa. Can a woman be a moheles? In other words, we know there's a mitzvah of milah, and traditionally speaking, a man usually is the mohel and does the circumcision. Mm-hmm. However, what is the status of a woman? A woman doctor, a woman moheles, whatever the case be. Yesterday we discussed that a woman is exempt from her obligation to circumcise her son. We learned that from a pasuk that when God told Abraham, you should take care of the circumcision for Yitzchak, you and not Sarah, we learned out lo v'lo la that a woman's exempt. And we gave different reasons why we need a pasuk if it's a time-oriented mitzvah anyway, and women are exempt from time-oriented mitzvahs. Why do we need a pasuk? So we gave different reasons, either assuming it's not time-oriented because you could do a mila shelo b'zmana all the time, day and night, or we explained it's an aseh sheish bo kares, and we gave different reasons why we need a pasuk. But the bottom line is a woman is exempt from her obligation to her son. However, that's only her personal obligation. But regarding, we said if there's no father, the community based in that's an obligation. So else the community is based in, so then a woman perhaps has an obligation. So the question is, can a woman be a Moheles? Our first glance, it seems to be a no-brainer. Of course she can. Well, I don't know, of course she can, but it's a pasuk in the Chumash, it seems to imply that way. Vatikach Miriam, Moshe's, not Miriam, Sipporah, Moshe's wife took, circumcised the children. So it says Vatikach, and it says she took the knife, the tzor, and she did the milah. So that should be at first glance that everyone should agree. However, it's a sugya in Avodah Zarah on Daf Chav Zayin and 27 in the Gemara Avodah Zarah, and there's a machokas in the Gemara whether a woman can be a Moheles or not. The discussion of the Gemara is first, can a Gentile be a Mohel? Could a non-Jewish doctor? I'm assuming that's the only person who would know how to do a milah, but a non-Jew period, whether he's a doctor or not. Maybe he's good with his hands and his knives, I don't know, but can a Gentile be a Mohel? So that's clear cut, the answer is no. The Gemara says no. It's a discussion in the Gemara based on which pasuk. The Gemara quotes two different verses to exclude a non-Jew, but the bottom line is it's the same answer, no. If that's the case, so what's the difference? What do I need two verses? Why not just quote one? So that's what the Gemara says. The practical difference would be whether a Isha, a woman, could be a Moheles. Based on one verse, it'd be not only is a Gayal, a Gentile, but also a woman. According to the other pasuk, woman in, Gentile out. So that's a machokas in the Gemara, whether a woman could be a Moheles, whether she's allowed to be a Moheles. And the Gemara says, so according to the opinion that says yes, I understand, they have the pasuk in the Chumash. But according to the opinion that says no, what do they do with the pasuk in Chumash? So the Gemara says, well, maybe she just told someone else to do it, but she didn't do it herself. Or perhaps she started it, but Moshe or someone else finished it. So either way, it's 2 days in the Gemara, and it's a discussion in the Rishonim whether an Isha could be a Moheles. So it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, it's preferable that a man be the Mohel. However, let's say during a time of need, let's say it could have been, whether it's during the times of the Holocaust, or let's say you're out in the Philippines somewhere, and you don't have a Mohel around. So that's what and that's what I think the Shach writes. What does it mean a time of need? If it's day 8, if it's Yom Shmini and the baby's healthy, and you don't have a male Mohel around, then that's considered a time of need, and then you could use a woman. Again, so that might be a discussion. How far you wait? Do you have to? If you know you're going to get a male tomorrow, but according to the Shach, he seems to say a Shas Hetzchach, it's good, and everyone agrees. But the it's good. That's the way we paskin in Shulchan Aruch. It's better not to because it's a machokas in the Gemara and the Poskim, but the Ramah paskins, an Isha can be. So even though she's clearly exempt, kasher tziba oso below oso, she's clearly exempt from the obligation of circumcising her son. Nevertheless, she's included under the rubric of based in that she can be a Moheles. What about Yisrael Mummer? What about a Jew who basically doesn't keep all or most of the commandments? There's a status in halacha called the Yisrael Mummer, and we see for certain halachas a Yisrael Mummer is classified as a guy. As for certain halachas, someone who doesn't keep the mitzvahs, a Jew who doesn't keep mitzvahs in certain areas is classified as a Gentile. Let me just point out at the outset, no, he can't be your Shabbos guy. He's 100% Jewish, this person. No one's saying for a second he's not Jewish. As the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Yisrael, Chachata Yisrael. We know no matter how much a Jew sins, there's a discussion if he leads to another religion, etc. But barring extreme circumstances, it's a no-brainer that a Jew who sins is still a Jew. So you can't use him for your Shabbos guy. You can't sell the chametz to him. We're not talking about that. He's certainly a Jew. But regarding certain halachas, a Yisrael mummer is classified as a guy. So therefore the question is, by Mila, what is the situation? So many Rishonim bring down that a Yisrael mummer cannot be a Moel. A Yisrael mummer, regarding the din of Mila, he has a din of a guy, and therefore he cannot do, a non-observant Jew cannot be the Moel. However, Rabbi Kiva Eger quotes the Vilna Gaon, who quotes the Tosfos and Rabbeinu Tam, that he can be that a Yisrael mummer can be a Moel. So again, so how do we paskin? So I'll give you a Ma'aseh Shahaya. There was a chaplain out in the Philippines. This is many years ago. I heard the story from Rav Shechter that and he was married, had a wife. She used to go into the mikveh in the water. There was no mikvahs. She used to go in the water, but there were sharks in the water. But she used to wear a bathrobe. I guess psychologically she felt protected if she was wearing a bathrobe that the sharks weren't going to get her. So either way, she became pregnant and she had a baby boy. So the question was, obviously in the Philippines you're not going to get a Moel. And he said, there happened to be a totally non-observant Jew who was a doctor and knew how to do circumcision. So he asked Rav Soloveitchik, what should I do? Should I have the Yisrael mummer do the circumcision? How do we paskin? So he said, let me talk to my father about it, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. So he discussed it with his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, and he said, it depends. Since you're a firm person, and we know you're going to make sure that whenever you get back into society again, you're going to make sure, we're not worried about you not having a milah for your child. So whatever it is, better for you, whether it's going to be 6 months, a year, 2 years, I'm not sure how long he went, but in his scenario, it was going to be, I think, 6 months to a year until he was going to come back to America. He said, okay, better to wait. Better not to do the Milah al Yidei Yisrael Mummer and do it properly in a year from now. That's what he did. However, he said, in a scenario, let's say you're talking about a non-observant family, and who knows, but when it's day 8, the baby's not going to feel it so much, or the baby cries at the meal. We're not sure why he cries. Is he cries because you have 100 people looking over him, everyone have all the cameras, the light, or it's a discussion whether he actually feels the pain or not on Yom Shemini. Different opinions among the doctors, whatever. So, but it's whatever the case is, it's a lot easier to get the Milah done on day 8 than year 5, year 15. Every time you go on, it's less likely that a person's going to get the Milah done. So therefore, he says if it's a concern where you're concerned that if you don't do the Milah now, it's not going to get done, then he said better rely on the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam and Avodah Zarah that a non-Jewish, that a non-observant Jew, Yisrael mummer, is good. So therefore, so it's better. So we see the order is obviously an observant Jew an observant Jewish male is number one, and Isha we paskin is good. It's just since it's a machlokas, if you have a male Moel, it's better than a woman. But if there's no one else, and the Shach says it's Yom Shemini, a woman should do it. But everyone agrees a woman's good, whether you should have done it or not. Even if there's a male around, but if a woman does it, the bottom line, the meal is good. Regarding Yisrael Mummer, that's a real shaila. In Shulchan Aruch we paskin, it's a machlokas. We should have the psak in Shulchan Aruch as Yisrael Mummer is not good, and therefore you should eat, if you can ensure the meal will be done, better to wait until you get back and find a Yisrael kosher to do it. But if in a scenario where you're not sure if the person's ever going to do a meal again, then better to at least rely on Rabbeinu Tam Shita that you could do it. In fact, this question isn't this related just to Mila. A Yisrael Mummer comes up. Many people are shocked when they hear it, but the issue, we're all familiar with the halacha of wine and yayin mavushal. We know that there's a concept that a non-Jew, a Gentile, can't touch the wine. And again, so that goes back to the time when the Mizbeach, they might use it for Avodah Zarah, the wine libations, but still the halacha still applies, Stam Yenam, that a non-Jewish can't be involved with the process of wine. So again, so we have a heter. One of the leniencies is yayin mavushal, that if it's cooked wine, so therefore, since it can't be brought on the Mizbeach, so therefore we are lenient today that if you have yayin mavushal, it's not an issue. That's why this goes back probably 20, 30 years when I was in YU, and there was some big event going on in Manhattan for, I guess, the president or something close to that. I guess it was about a $25,000 a head meal, and they called up, and I guess they were serving the good wine, not Bartanura, but Yayin She'ena Mavushal. They were making wine and they called up YU to send over Jewish waiters. I don't know if they were makpid on Jewish observant waiters or not, but they at least got Jewish waiters. But we all know, we're familiar with the halacha that if a non-Jew touches wine and She'ena Mavushal, you can't drink it. However, not so many people are familiar with the halacha. What about a Yisrael Mummer? What about a non-observant Jew if he touches wine? So again, that's a discussion in the post-Pashas of Yisrael Mummer regarding this. Many bring down is, in fact, I think Rav Shechter quotes, he thinks that's the normative halacha based on Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, that one should be makbid, that if you have a non-observant Jews, you shouldn't be serving yayin she'ena mavushal, or if you do, make sure you're taking care of the issue because it's problematic. And in fact, there's a shaila today about pasteurized wine, that it's a whole discussion among the poskim. How high does the degree get? Is all wines pasteurized? Are they not? So there's more room as well if it's pasteurized but not cooked. So you have already a sveka. You already have another doubt to rely on. If it's yayin she'ena mavushal, so therefore it's best that a non-observant Jew not touch it. I'm not saying, so then there's a discussion today, perhaps today, the issue of a tinok shenishba. Today, the non-observant Jews have a status of a child that was taken captive, but they don't know. It's not the days where they were rebelling, and most don't know. So therefore, there are poskim who are mekel today regarding if non-observant Jews touch the wine. So again, l'chatchila, it's clear it's best to avoid the shaila, but obviously in different places out of town where it's a common occurrence, where you have non-observant people at your meals all the time, so obviously the best thing is not to serve yayin she'ena mavushal, but push comes to shove, the normative halacha is to be machmir. However, probably in out-of-town communities, perhaps the minig might be to make, you have, on this specific case, but that's what depends on this issue. But that the Yisrael Mummer having a status of a guy, even though he's a Jew, chol davar, but regarding certain halachas, Chazal treated Yisrael Mummer as a guy just for those things, but he's definitely a Jew. You can't use him as a Shabbos guy, so that is mechiras chametz. So to summarize, the conclusion is a Gentile is definitely out for doing the circumcision based on two different psukim. Machok is in the Gemara regarding a woman. We paskin a woman is okay, but l'chatchil we go with a man. But if there's no one else around, then a woman could do it. And regarding Yisrael Mummer, the Psak in Shulchan Aruch says that he cannot do it. That's why the Rav said better to wait till you come back. But b'diavad, you're concerned that they're not going to do the bris at all, so better at least rely on Rabbeinu Tam Shita and have the bris. And we find that it's not only related to bris, but we have these halachas as well by yayin, that if a non-Jew touches wine, we know it's no good. But there's a discussion regarding Yisrael Mummer, touching Yayin Shein Mavashil. So different, different communities have different customs to what you're going to rely on. But obviously, it's best to avoid the issue. But there's what to discuss if it happens. Let's say for whatever reason you have no choice, you have to do it. So there are those who say, perhaps Yeshami Lismoch. Today, the Tinach Shenishba, you can rely on a b'diavad. If a Yisrael Mummer did pour wines, then there's, I'm not saying there's nothing to rely on, but that's not the normative halacha.